Hey y'all, I thought I would share a couple tips I have for teaching students how to cut shapes in art class and to do so efficiently. Now, all the shapes right here, I cut out of this 4.5 by 6 inch piece of paper. And so my first tip actually is for teachers. If you want to avoid this, which is my pet peeve, when students take an entire sheet of construction paper, cut out one little thing, and then toss it aside, and nobody wants to use this because it's not brand new and shiny, this will save you a lot of headaches. So I know cutting paper takes time. It's a prep that we often don't have. But if you can cut your construction paper sheets in half or in quarters, you're going to save a lot on construction paper waste and also just on scraps and cleanup. Okay. So in general, I cut my construction paper into smaller pieces and then I give that to students. Okay. Now for teaching them how to cut. So a lot of times what students do is they try to cut into the center of the paper, or they try to sort of cut out an individual shape rather than looking at the shapes that are already there. So something I go over with my students is to look at the shape that's already there. So this is a rectangle, and let's say I want to make a square. So instead of trying to cut a square out of the rectangle, I'm just going to go from the side and I'm going to make two cuts, 1 and 2. And then I have my square. Now from here, if they want to make triangles, they can take their scissors and cut right across here, 1 and 2. And then you've got 2 triangles that are just about the same size. Not perfect, but just about the same size. And then from here, if they wanted to do, I think this is a parallelogram, cut right across here. And they can either leave that angled shape on there, or they can cut that off and make 2 smaller triangles. So really what I'm trying to get my students to think about is, what shapes do you already see? So right here, I see another way that I could do a triangle. I could do a big triangle or a smaller triangle here. I could cut an angle here, make a triangle. If I wanted to make a rectangle, I can cut across here. And then if I have a shape that I like, this is kind of a different shape, I could keep it, or I can trim this off, and then I have another triangle. So we want students to think about how they're seeing the overall shape rather than trying to go this way where they're doing a shape here and then they're wasting some paper. Okay, for cutting circles, some kids are good at cutting circles freehand, some struggle. And so if you have some kiddos that are struggling with drawing out circles, use jar lids. And so you could use something like a mason jar lid that actually gives you 2 size circles like this. So on the inside ring is a little smaller, outside ring is a little bigger. Probably should have used a light colored pencil for this so you could see better. So I'm going to trace those out. We also want to remind kids when they're tracing to try to fit as many shapes onto that piece of paper as possible by going close to the edges. Another tip I have for when you're teaching kids how to cut things out, or just helping them, giving them some tips to make it easier, is to cut any large piece of paper smaller so you have more control. And here's something that I notice. A lot of students, when they're trying to cut out a shape, they try to move the scissors in their hand. And this becomes really awkward. And I'm kind of exaggerating right now. But they're trying to move the scissors, and that's frustrating. And it can hurt their hand. What I try to remind students is to move the paper. So I'm holding the paper in one hand. I've got my scissors in the other. And I'm using this part of the scissors right here as my cutting tool. This part of the scissors tends to have more power than the tips. So if you're cutting from the tips, you don't have as much control maybe and as much power. So we're going to put our scissors in. We're going to line it up. And then we're going to keep the scissors fairly still as we press down on them, but we're moving the paper. See how I'm rotating the paper? And then I take a a minute to reposition, open the scissors up, and I'm turning the paper. And by teaching my students how to turn the paper, they have more control over what they're cutting. They go a little slower at first to kind of get the hang of it, but then they have a much more accurate shape. Now, if I'm going to cut freehand, that same idea of moving the paper instead of the scissors also works. So let's say I want to cut out some organic shapes. By moving the paper, I kind of get to have this free-flowing effect, and I keep using my non-dominant hand to do more of the work, and then my scissor hand is just doing the cutting part, and I get some cool shapes like that. Okay, so those are a few tips for teaching kids how to cut out paper efficiently in your classroom. You'll have much less waste if you're making the papers, smaller to begin with, and taking some pressure off of their hands by moving the paper. Okay, have fun.